Okay, well I got my cartoonishly large micrometer in the mail so I can set the preload for the differential bearings. So the way Mazda wants me to check this is put the giant micrometer from here to here and measure the spread of the case when I tighten the bearings, but the issue is there's no load on the bearings right now and it's already reading more than the amount they say, so that's not going to work. Either this micrometer is out of whack or something else is going on. Okay, so I ended up setting the preload to something. I don't know. Next. So a while back I pressed these solid mounts into the tiny differential, but now that I'm not using the tiny differential anymore, I gotta get them back out to put them in the big differential. Okay, well those are done, and I also put seals in it while I was at it. So the last thing I'm going to do to this differential before I put it together is check the tooth engagement. Now in theory, it should be fine because I haven't messed with the pinion at all, but the issue with theory is it's wrong a lot, so I'm going to check it anyway. Alright, well I got some mustard. It claims to be gear marking compound, but I'm not convinced. Basically, you just kind of slather it on there and then spin it around, and that tells you what the tooth engagement looks like. I mean, yeah, I don't see anything wrong. Supposedly, if it's bad, it'll be like worn out in some areas and not others, but it's pretty even here, so sure, I'll call that good. Okay, so this is good to go now after what feels like years. Good. Oh yeah, and this is a 1.5-way limited slip. Now, when people talk about a 2-way versus a 1-way versus a 1.5-way, basically nobody knows what it actually means. People just assume a 2-way is best because, bigger number better. But in reality, it depends on your car and what you're doing with it and your preference. A 2-way tends to be best for drifting, but a 1.5-way or a 1-way tends to be better for everything else because a 2-way will kind of understeer going into corners, while a 1.5-way or a 1-way will tend to oversteer into corners, which is more desirable. So I had to find some turbo CV axles, and CV axles are one of those things that I try to stick to OEM because it's one of those things that the aftermarket just can't figure out how to make, but unfortunately OEM ones are insanely priced, so I got these. They're whatever, I don't know, hopefully they'll last a while. Alright, so I was just pressing these spindles into the bearings, and this one's really loose, which I was afraid of. This spindle is all screwed up. See how like the end of it looks different than that part? Basically, the original 2-piece wheel bearing, half of it had seized, so this was just spinning around inside the seized bearing. So this spindle is garbage now, but I decided to try it anyway, which was dumb because now I gotta replace that wheel bearing again. But I gotta get these extended studs out so I don't gotta buy new ones. Alright, I got my extended studs out. Alright, well, I've reached the task of lifting this heavy shit up under the car. So, an unfortunate side effect of these solid mounts is, since they're completely rigid and don't flex like the stock ones, they make the subframe a lot harder to install. Like if everything isn't lined up just so, it won't go. but I eventually got it up there. Only 3 of the 4 mounting nuts are on there because the threads on this stud are messed up, so I need to get a tap for that. Another issue is the forward differential mounting nuts are impossible to get to, and I need to be able to access those because I gotta loosen them to allow the subframe to tilt so I can adjust the camber, and not being able to get to them really sucks. So I cut a hole in the floor. Now the nuts are easy to get to. There's also a hole in the floor, but you can't have everything. New hub came in, or new to me anyway. Came in a set, so I have a spare now. All right, so the knuckles and the bearings and the hubs and the studs, all this stuff's ready to go in the car now. I had to grind this down a little bit to get it to go over the solid bushing. Okay, one more of the 10 billion things that needs to be done is done. Might as well install the rear coilovers too. Alright, so for the most part, the suspension's done now. I got a tap set for the subframe stud with the messed up threads. Okay, I ran a tap through the stud, and that's good now, so the subframe's fully mounted. Engine parts came in, brand new irons from Japan. So they don't make the non-turbo 6-port ones anymore, but they do make the turbo 4-port ones, so I got a set of those. Oh, this thing is so nice and pristine. It's time to grind it with a Dremel. I got another porting plate, so I'm gonna, you know, do that. I'm gonna like quintuple layer duct tape it around the port so I don't gouge it. You think that's protected enough? I mean, this is also just to keep it clean, because the less metal shavings I get in it, the less I have to clean out later. Alright, well the irons are ported. I also got a brand new set of housings and I'm also going to port, and these are for an FD RX7, and basically the only difference I know of with this is the spark plug holes are in different locations, and basically what that does is it's probably better or something, I don't know. Alright, everything's ported now, and I did it all without gouging anything with the grinder, so that's nice. The ports on the housings are interesting because the actual port is much smaller than this steel sleeve, but I don't want a huge exhaust port, so I just kind of blended it as best I could. I also got brand new rotors. Now, there's nothing technically broken on the originals, they're just non-turbo high compression rotors, whereas this has a deeper dish, which lowers the compression. You know, on a rotary, just like on a piston engine, you want to lower the compression when you boost it, so you don't blow the thing up. And this is a turbo S4 rotor, so it's both the lowest compression and the strongest, with the downside of it being the heaviest, so it doesn't like to spin as fast, but you can't have everything. So now I'm going to start the painstaking process of gapping the side seals, which is basically the same as gapping piston rings. So I got a little piston ring filer. There's 12 of the stupid things, and they all have to go into their own individual little slot. Okay, this piston ring filer is too slow. I'm gonna be here all year if I keep using this. Okay, I bolted it to the table and removed the hand crank, so now I can hook the drill up to it. That should be faster. So after these things are clearance, they gotta go back exactly where they came from. So this is the smooth side of the rotor, so I've labeled them smooth 1, smooth 2, and smooth 3. So I'm gonna take smooth 1 and put it in smooth 1 bag, and then the rightmost corner seal goes with that one and then just put it to the right. That's the best way I can think of to do it. Well, this shiny new iron is on the stand, so I guess now I'm just gonna kind of start stacking this thing and find out how many parts I'm missing that won't allow me to actually do that. I just realized there's a tiny little pit right there that I didn't put there. It's a casting imperfection. Mazda's slacking. I was just cleaning up these oil control rings from the old engine I wanted to reuse and got to measuring them and no, they're out of spec. And I really didn't want to replace these because they're comically expensive. It's like $600 for a set, but I mean, when I bought the new housings and irons and rotors and whatever, I kind of committed myself to not using stuff that's out of spec because it'd be kind of dumb. So essentially every single thing from those original 2 engines I had is complete garbage. It's mostly just gonna be a brand new engine. I think I'm gonna reuse the original eccentric shaft and like the stationary gears and the oil pan, but apart from that, it's all gonna be new. So anyway, once again, waiting on parts. Good. So last time I was complaining about not being able to find replacement tie rods for this manual steering rack, and apparently these manual steering racks are sought after because they're good or something, I don't know. They're also rare, so it makes sense that nobody makes replacement tie rods for the 5 people on the planet that have them. But I did find this. It's a Heim joint style tie rod that's supposed to work. I always put a lot of thread locker on tie rods just cause. I use a lot of thread locker in general because I've had too much shit come loose in the past, so I just put it on everything. Alright, the tie rods are done. Good. I get comments every now and then of people being like, oh, you should try electric power steering. Do electric power steering. But honestly, I would rather have manual steering if I can help it, just from a reliability standpoint, because, you know, the best thing to make something more reliable is to have it not exist. You know, if no power steering exists, there's no pumps to go bad, no hydraulic lines to burst, no electric motors to go bad, no wires to go bad, no computers to go bad. It's just steering rack. It steers the car. There's no situations where you're at the track like, oh no, my electric power steering died, the sensor's bad, or the computer died, or whatever. Oh, I can't make my run now. If the power steering didn't exist, it wouldn't have broken. Now, one of the downsides to manual steering is the ratio is slower, so you have to turn the wheel more to steer the car. And, you know, I don't really mind it because I'm used to it and it's not a big deal. What I don't like is modern car steering, where this is as far as you ever turn the wheel. I've autocrossed new cars and it's just ass because there's no precision in it. Like, the car just wants to dart around everywhere. It feels fake. Like, it's designed for the average Joe to take it for a test drive and go, oh, this thing drives good, oh, it steers on a dime. But in reality, it doesn't actually turn any better. It just has a stupid fast steering ratio. Okay, I got brand new, expensive as shit oil control rings. Alright, so the springs that go behind these oil control rings, they have different paint colors on them because they're directional. So the blue has to go to the rear side of the rotors, except it's not as simple as the rotor just having a front and a rear side. No, because the gear side of the rear rotor is the rear, but the smooth side of the front rotor is the rear because they're mounted in opposite directions. And if you put these in wrong, it messes stuff up, and I'm seeing why so many people's rotary rebuilds blow up immediately because there's so much minute shit like this that you can do wrong. Now, the reason the springs are directional is because they need to lock the oil control rings in place because they're not supposed to spin. So there's a notch in the rotor itself it locks into, and there's more notches on the ring. So the ring is also directional. Those got to face down. You have to push down pretty hard to get these things to go in. And I read online that they're really sharp, and yeah, they're like razor blade sharp, so I put some big gloves on to press them in because hospital bills are expensive. So I need to remove the pilot bearing from the eccentric shaft, and I'm gonna try the bread trick, which is basically where you just hammer bread into it, and then it like presses it out. Okay, well that worked well, like really well. I'd never actually tried that before. It's like an old grandpa trick, but it's real. All right, new pilot bushings in. Okay, so all the apex seals and everything are in this rotor, so it's ready for the center iron now. And I glued the O-rings onto it with Helamar, because apparently that's a good thing to use. Mazda says to use petroleum jelly, but apparently that's bad for modern seals, so I don't know. Now, it's not as simple as just dropping it on there. No, you gotta lift up the eccentric shaft so it can fish over onto it, and it's really more of a two-person job, but I'm gonna try putting a jack under it to support it and see how that goes. Well, I had it halfway on and then the stupid apex seal corner popped out, so I need to try to get it back off again without disassembling everything else. Now they all fell out. Great. Where the hell did they go? Alright, one was hiding in that hole there. Found the other one, it was in that hole. I'm gonna put a drop of super glue on these just so they don't pop out again, because that was dumb. It may lose compression before the first start, but after it starts up, the super glue will melt away. Alright, the center iron's on, and the solution for lifting the eccentric shaft was a motorcycle jack and 2 pieces of railroad tie. Everybody has those laying around, right? So one of the strength upgrades I'm gonna do on this thing is 1-piece dowels. Now, the stock dowels are 2 pieces, and they kind of split in the middle, and Mazda did it that way so that the engine would be possible to assemble. So basically, I've temporarily put some of the stock ones in, so I'm gonna pull those out now, and then put in the 1-piece ones. Okay, well those are in. Now this one's solid in the middle, but this one's hollow because the way oil gets from the front to the rear of the engine is through this dowel. Now you can make this one solid too by putting like extra oil lines on the outside of the engine, but honestly that sounds like it's more effort than it's worth to me because I don't imagine it's much weaker. Alright, so I'm gonna do this one a little bit different. I've put the housing on and I've got the apex seals held in with a rubber band, and supposedly dropping it in like this can make it easier. Now this is all stacked together, so now I need to bolt it together, and supposedly these tension bolts are reusable, so I'm just gonna clean them up and put them on. A lot of these bolts are really rusty, so I picked out the best ones from the 2 sets I had. Alright, so that was basically just like torquing a cylinder head. I went around in a specific pattern and kept tightening the same ones over and over and over again until they're all the same tightness. So I was just turning this thing over, and each rotor face is making a nice whooshing noise. I don't feel anything weird or hear anything weird, so we essentially have now a brand spanking new 13B. Now, of course, until I get it in the car and running and it doesn't burn or leak coolant or oil, I can't guarantee it's a good engine, so for now it's Schrodinger's engine. I got a new oil pump because the turbo cars came with a bigger pump, so I got one of those bigger pumps. I put the old chain in the vise to hold it still so I can put the gear on it, so that's good to go now. I also got a lightweight flywheel. Now, the factory flywheel is also a built-in counterweight, and what these lightweight flywheels do is they use the counterweight from the automatic cars, and that has the added benefit of moving the weight more toward the center, which makes it even easier to spin, so that's nice. So the way Mazda wants you to torque down this giant nut is use a special counterweight holder. I looked for one of those, couldn't find one, and I was reading forums and there's people like, yeah, just run it on with the impact, but I'd rather not do that. There, counterweight holder. Now this prevents this from turning, so I can torque it down. All right, so the torque spec for this shit is 350 foot-pounds, so I got this torque adapter. I'm gonna muscle it on there. Okay, giant nut is now torqued. Good. This torque adapter is nice. It basically just turns any breaker bar or wrench into a torque wrench. It's basically like buying a torque wrench, but hold the wrench. Showed FM, incoming caller.
You guys are playing that music too goddamn loud.
Okay, so this front cover. Now, this is a non-turbo cover, meaning it has no drain for the turbo, which is a problem. I was gonna use this 10AN fitting whatever, but the surface is not flat, so the rubber washer wouldn't seal. So I just went on a 2-hour road trip to pick up the only 59/64 drill bit in stock, so I can drill and tap an NPT fitting. All right, I drilled and tapped the hole. Now, I don't have the fitting yet, but the hole's there, so this cover's ready to go on. Oh yeah, and there's one more thing I'm gonna do to this cover. I got a oil pressure crank up kit that came with a stiffer spring to put in here. All right, so this spring plus 2 of these shims should increase the oil pressure to about 120 PSI. Okay, so that was the oil pressure relief spring. This is the actual pressure regulator, and it goes over on the engine. I put some thread tape and thread locker on this, because I felt like it. Okay, so the oil pressure should now be 120 PSI, which is a lot, but I'm pretty sure it's because these things use oil to cool the rotors, so more pressure, more oil, more cooling. It makes sense. I made a mistake. Now, when you're assembling this here engine, you're supposed to put RTV here and here, but I didn't do that. So basically what that means is this little like air pump EGR emissions port thing will leak, which, you know, I'm obviously gonna use, but in theory, if I wasn't gonna use that stuff, that wouldn't be an issue. And the second thing that can leak is this is the oil pan area. Oil is, you know, sloshing around in here doing oil stuff, and it can technically leak past these things. It wouldn't be much because these things are sandwiched pretty tight against each other, but you know, it's still an issue. So my options now are either A, disassemble the entire engine just to put RTV in it and then put it all back together again, or just slather RTV on the outside and call it a day. I'd say it's pretty obvious which one I'm gonna do. All right, so I just finished putting all this together. There's 2 needle bearings in there and some spacers and the balance shaft and that gear and the pulley. I took some pulleys off of the pulley because this car is not gonna have power steering or air conditioning, so don't need those. And I torqued it down so that I can check the end play, which is fine. So that's good. Oh yeah, and I found out what the weird spring thing is that goes behind the pulley bolt. Basically, this is the temperature pellet, and basically what it does is it blocks oil from getting to the rotors while the engine is cold to help it heat up, and they have a tendency to fail and break engines, so the seal kit I got came with this thing that deletes it. So apparently even something as simple as the front cover gasket is an issue on these things. So the stock paper gasket uses this nylon washer with a rubber O-ring inside it, and apparently the front cover can flex enough under the oil pressure to make the O-ring fall out, and then you lose oil pressure, which is just fantastic. And that issue is only made worse when you crank up the oil pressure, like I've done. So later on, for the FD RX7, Mazda switched to this steel gasket that doesn't do that, so I got one of those. Every engine on everything I ever buy, doesn't matter what it is, they always just have diabolical sludge inside them. Alright, so the front cover, oil pan, and flywheel are all on, so I guess this can bolt up to the transmission now. So I was just about to reuse the original clutch bolts, but for some dumb reason, 2 of them are not all thread. They have a shank on them, which won't work with this flywheel, so I have to go buy bolts now. Alright, I got bolts. Alright, so the transmission didn't want to go on because I don't think the clutch was quite lined up. And these clutch kits always come with these little plastic alignment tools, but they never work worth a shit because you put it in and the clutch is still allowed to move all over the place, so you're better off just junking that and eyeballing it. I got a new starter because since this is a turbo transmission, the original one won't work anymore, and this is actually an automatic starter because Mazda deemed the automatic cars needed beefier starters, so that's a common upgrade. Okay, well that's in now. It sits kind of crooked, and when I first saw that, I'm like, something's out of whack somewhere, but I looked it up and apparently it's just like that. So, okay. I put it in with polyurethane mounts. I didn't go full solid mounts because polyurethane mounts are usually stiff enough and they won't completely rattle your teeth out. And I can already hear the comments, "Oh, you didn't clean the bay out before you put the engine in. What's wrong with you?" I don't know, I just didn't want to. The car works the same way whether it's clean or not. But anyway, so now that the engine's in the car, there's just a few small things left to do, like intake manifold, turbo, exhaust system, fuel tank, cooling system, intercooler system, oil cooling system, wiring harness, you know, simple, easy stuff like that. Subscribe.